Good evening and welcome to yet another special edition of the 3-on-3 podcast. We've had a couple of guests who have been interesting and entertaining, and I suspect tonight's will just be the same. Thankfully, I have the Diva and Scott with me this evening. John, Scott, how are you, gents?
I'm very good, boys. Sorry for looking so dishevelled, everybody. I've just barely been out of the shower after my spin class, so I'm not looking my best, but we'll have some fun, and thanks for coming on, Zach.
The Diva being a diva, wasn't it? So, yeah, no, all good, mate.
We expect nothing less, don't we? Well, we've said who it is, but we'll give him his intro. Went through the junior system of Invicta, Swindon and Guildford. Made his senior debut for Invicta. Spells at Slough, Basingstoke before his Elite League debut with Braehead, as it was then. A summer stint with the Canterbury Red Devils in New Zealand, now settled in Manchester. Twice Young British Player of the Year. Represented Great Britain under 18s, 20s and senior level, and was part of the team that got promoted to the Pool A of the World Championships in that famous series in Budapest. It's our delight to welcome Zach Sullivan. Zach, thank you for giving up your time this evening. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. That was a really nice intro as well, so thanks. Makes me feel good about myself.
I hope we got the detail correct.
Yeah, I was checking through them, and I think that's about right. So
we'll take that. We'd go on to the detail, but as we were meant to do this last week and it got delayed for reasons, including your end of season awards evening, how was that?
Yeah, it was good. There were a few less fans than normal. I think it was more geared towards it being an event for our corporate sponsors and stuff, but it was good to kind of, it kind of sums up the season. You kind of all get together for kind of not necessarily one last time, but one last time officially, and just kind of celebrate the guys that have exceeded expectations or kind of helped you get to where you are as a team. So I think Stephen Johnson and Jeremy Broder kind of cleaned up. So they're two really important. And then obviously I live with Michael Correll, who's I think it's his rookie year this year, and he got the we had a guy who worked with us called Pops, and he passed away. So we have a Pops Community Award, Community Lifetime Award, and it was really nice to see Mikey win that. He gives up his time every Tuesday, every Thursday to go down and help the kids in the academy, and I am gonna embarrass him a little bit. He did cry on stage, so. But no, it was nice. It was nice to see him recognised because he does a lot for our team that I think goes very unnoticed. So that was really nice.
Fantastic stuff. So we don't get many people that go through Swindon and Invicta in terms of juniors. So give us a little insight into what that was like.
Well, so I actually started out playing roller hockey. My brother played roller hockey on Fridays, just at like the local sports centre in a sports hall. And I used to put my roller skates on and skate up and down the emergency ramp. Just literally skating up and down while my brother was practicing, and that team moved to it kind of merged with a team based in Guildford. Didn't even know ice hockey existed, and one of the coaches at the roller hockey said, "Oh, have you thought about ice hockey?" And my mum tells the story a little bit better than I do, but apparently I guilt tripped her, which does sound like me, to be fair. So we did. Me and my younger sister, she's a year and a half younger than me, we did trials around, I think we went to 7 or 8 different teams: Guildford, Bracknell, Slough, Basingstoke. And then the last one we went to was Invicta, and it was, learn to play session. So there were children of all various abilities, some that couldn't skate, some who were okay, some who were quite good. And one of the young dynamos was, so a few of the dynamos came out, and the guy I was paired with was a guy called Anthony Lennon, who felt incredibly old when I retold him this story when he was my D partner and when I played for Invicta Dynamos. And every other team kind of required some kind of skating level or some kind of previous experience playing ice hockey, and Invicta were just happy to have me and my little sister. So based in Surrey, it was about a 45-minute drive down to Kent and Gillingham in Kent, and yeah, just kind of never looked back. I think the very first games we both played were for the Thames Terrors, which was a combination of Romford and Invicta, because they didn't have enough children to form a team each, so they merged into one, and it was in a tournament in Normandy. So I think everyone's favourite memories when they're younger is kind of playing those tournaments as a kid, and that was my first experience of hockey, so of ice hockey anyway. And then I kind of got to the age, I was 13, 14. I'd had my first England trial and didn't make the England 13s, and my mum kind of, with no offence intended towards Invicta, because I love Invicta personally, kind of decided it was because I was at Invicta rather than one of the bigger teams, and decided to move over to Swindon, which is an hour and a half in the other direction. And at the time, a not very well-known coach called Peter Russell was the under-14s coach. So me and my little sister had both been on the best British camps where he'd been coach, and my little sister doesn't respond positively to many coaches, but he was one of them, and I really enjoyed being coached by him when I was younger. So once we found out he was coach, it was kind of a no-brainer, and kind of went over to Swindon and played, I think, 3 or 4 years there. So yeah.
No, sounds like a very supportive mum there. So we go juniors and seniors. Like we say, you made your debut for Invicta, but you also had spells at Slough and Basingstoke. What are your memories from them years?
Well, I actually made my senior debut when I was 13 years old. Aaron Connolly was playing for the Dynamos. He's a year older than me. So he was 14 playing for the Dynamos. We had an away game in Swindon, under 14s, and the Dynamos didn't have enough players. They were playing the Swindon Wildcats ENL 2 team, ENL 1 team at the time, and they didn't have enough players. So Aaron was playing, and then they asked me if I wanted to play, and I was kind of like, well, we're here, we might as well. So me and Aaron played. So I broke his record for youngest Dynamo, and then he scored in the game, so he made his own record for himself. And then I wanted to stay in Swindon, and a couple of guys at my age had come back from the States, North America, and Canada, and they were kind of put in the pecking order above me. So I kind of spoke to Kev Parrish, who was the coach in Invicta, and he agreed to have me on. And unfortunately, one of my very close friends passed away that year, who I played with in Swindon. And I wanted to represent Southwest Conference. So that's how the whole Guildford thing came about. Guildford were the only team that had an under-18s team but didn't have an ENL 1 team. And at the time, that was how it worked. You could only play for a team that didn't have a team themselves. And Milos Melicheric was very kind of accommodating. I think I played 5 games for Guildford all season. And he was very accommodating. You know, he said, go play with Dynamos first, and if you don't have a game, come play with us, which was, I think, the only time Guildford have ever done that. So I'm, kind of eternally grateful for Milos for letting me do that, and got to represent Southwest in my last year of conference, which obviously meant a lot to me with Jack passing away. So then, I had a year in Invicta, and you'll see a recurring theme through my career. I get very, very lucky. So Pete Russell was coach in Slough, and he had asked me if I wanted to play for the Jets, the EPL team. And when the EPL didn't have a game, I played for the ENL 1 team. And I kind of thought, well, I'd progress better playing ENL 1 rather than sitting on the bench for EPL and playing every now and again for ENL 1. And then Pete left and went to Swindon and took 2 D-men with him, which left Slough with 4 D-men. So the coach that took over, Doug Shepherd, called me, said, look, we've got 4 D-men. The offer's kind of changed. You're now going to be coming in as 5th D-man. And I kind of talked to my coach in Invicta, and I remember my last practice there, I think I was crying my eyes out because I didn't want to leave. I didn't want to be that player that left the team halfway through a year. And I think Kev kind of told me to shut up and grow up and go and kickstart my career. So went to Slough with Shep and some of the guys that played there it was insane for a 17-year-old. Doug Shepherd was still an incredible player. Both Joe and Adam Greener, Aaron Connolly was there, Ryan Watt, Tom Carlon, Darius Plaskauskas, and Adam Calder. And Adam Calder was phenomenal at that level. I've heard stories of how good he was at the Elite League. You imagine him stepping down a league. He was phenomenal. And I was 17. He was, I think, 34, and I was kind of his adopted child for the whole season, which was I talked about on another podcast earlier this week. He was, as a 34-year-old, especially now, being one of the older guys on the teams. As soon as practice is done, you're off the ice and you're getting ready to go home. And he was travelling an hour and a half down from Coventry and still staying on the ice with me 45 minutes, an hour after practice, working on things. And, at the time, I kind of recognised how much of a big deal it was, and kind of looking back, it's even more of a big deal to kind of get that one-on-one coaching with probably one of the best ever goal scorers that's come over to this country. And then we were top of the league at Christmas, but we've been knocked out of the cup. So the owner slashed the budget, which meant a few changes were made. We ended up finishing fourth, but won the playoffs. Then a load of guys were done with kind of the ownership, and they wanted to leave. And Shep went over to Basingstoke and kind of said to me, "Look, I want to take you with me. Do you want to come with?" And it kind of, like, we all got on really well in Slough, but the split kind of split us down the middle. So we had half the team go to Basingstoke and half the team stay in Slough. So the games were full of animosity, because it was like, "Oh, you stayed, how could you stay?" And the other half was, "Oh, you left, how could you leave?" So yeah, it was kind of weird. And then obviously I stayed in Basingstoke for I think 2 years. We won the cup my first year. No, we didn't win anything my first year, and then we won the cup and the playoffs. And then again, I got lucky. I kind of talked to Shep at my exit meeting at the end of the year, and I knew he was going to ask me what I wanted to do. I trained with Coventry Blaze, my first year in Basingstoke. And then I kind of wanted to step up, see if I was good enough for the Elite League. And I was still only 19. So in my head, I was kind of like, if I'm not good enough, I've got enough time to step back down, work on things and step back up. And I kind of figured out all the arguments in my head. If he says I need another year, I got this answer. If he says this, I can say this. And we sat down at a coffee, I think it was at Starbucks in Basingstoke Town Centre, and he said, "What do you want to do next year?" I said, "I want to give it a shot." And his response was, "Okay, where do you want to go?" Which was the last thing I was expecting. I was expecting him to be like, no, 1 more year, 2 more years, and kind of took me aback and kind of went through the clubs. At the time, Garside was unbelievable for Belfast. Ben O'Connor and David Phillips were in Sheffield. Mark Richardson and Josh Batcher in Cardiff, and kind of went through all the teams. And Braehead was the one team that didn't really have a British D-man. And I knew Ryan Watt and Matt Toe, who had played there, and kind of said, that's where I kind of want to give it a shot. So this was on a Wednesday afternoon, and Shep said, "Okay, give me till Friday, I'll give you a ring back." So he called me later that day, about 3 hours later. Had a call from him, and I went, "Oh no, I've done something wrong." And he went, "Yeah, so just to let you know, you're signed in Braehead next year." I was like, "Oh, okay. I probably need to tell my parents that I'm moving 8 hours away from home before I commit to anything." So yeah, like I said, I've been extremely lucky. I mean, I know I've kind of taken my chances when I've had them, but equally I've had some very encouraging coaches throughout my time. Kev could have easily said, "No, I want you to stay." Shep could have easily said the same thing, and they've all given me chances. Even Finner, when I first went to Braehead, gave me a chance. We had pre-season against Asiago, who ended up being the Italian champions that year. We had 5 D-men because Zach Fitzgerald was late coming over, and then one of our other D-men got a concussion, and second or third shift, so we're down to 4 D-men straight away. So before the game, I was kind of looking at it. Okay, I'm going to fit in here or there, and then obviously 2 shifts in, I'm going, okay, there's 4 of us. I'm now playing a regular shift in my first elite. I know it's preseason, but elite league game, and I was kind of like, oh, okay, like thrown in the deep end. But no, I obviously did well enough for Finner to kind of trust in me. I mean, I've played in this league this is my 9th year, and he's been my coach for 6, so must have done something right.
No, I just want to. You said like 4 times there. You've been lucky. I think you make your own luck. So that's been seen. I just want to go back to your Slough days. I'm a Coventry Blaze fan, and Adam Calder was, if not one of the best players to grace the Elite League. He, from the outside looking in as a fan, he was a quiet guy, but you said he kind of took you under his wing. What was he like off the ice and as a person?
He was a quiet guy, but he's also he was almost so he wasn't necessarily quiet. He was just reserved. He was very confident in his own ability. He knew he had nothing to prove, especially at EPL level when he'd torn apart the Elite League for I think 4 years and he had over 160 goals. So he knew he had nothing to prove. And I remember kind of my first training session, and everyone was like, "Oh, cool, Sully is young enough to be your son." And just from then on, I was his son, which, I mean, he was seriously talented. I mean, some of the things he taught me are still relevant today. So, you know, it's not like he taught me old school hockey or anything like that. And I mean, we used to play crossbar challenge at the end of every practice, and by every practice I mean every practice. So we were training 3 times a week, and I don't think my parents really appreciated it because we'd play for a drink. So he would get a Lucozade Sport, I would get a Lucozade Energy, and he would stand there, take a slap shot, and ring it off the crossbar every time, first time. And it was just that consistent level. But when he piped up and chirped someone, it was kind of it could be something so simple, but it was the biggest burn ever because Calds had finally decided to say something. And I remember when we went into playoffs that year, I don't think he'd scored for 6 or 7 games, and everyone was saying, "Oh, you know, he's past it. He's nowhere near as good as he used to be." We lost 7-4 in Milton Keynes. He scored all 4. And then we beat them 7-3 at home, and he scored 4 again. And it was kind of like, yeah, okay, like he might not be as good as he used to be, but he's still, I mean, he was one of the best guys I've ever played with. And it's not just, obviously he's passed away now, but it's not just because of that. He would take time out of, you know, we could be playing a game against Guildford, who he always challenged the league with. And he'd take time out of a really important game to come over and be like, "Hey, instead of doing that, do this, and this is why, and this will help you." And it was the kind of insight he gave me, especially as a young player. I mean, it was invaluable. I mean, how many, you know, it's kind of, whenever a young kid comes on the ice with us, you know, we've got a young kid from the academy playing skating with us this week at the moment. It's kind of encouraged me to do everything I can to make them comfortable, to make them feel at home. You know, 17-year-old kid, I think I came 6 games into the season. It was terrifying. I knew a couple of guys, but it's terrifying. You've gone from, you know, amateur, which is what ENL 1 was. You know, there were 2 or 3 teams that paid their players. Everyone else paid to play, to a semi-pro professional league. And he kind of made me feel quite comfortable, and that's I've kind of taken from that. And, you know, if someone new comes and skates with us, whether they're a young Brit or a young import, it's just, you know, hey, just relax, enjoy yourself. You know, we had a young kid trial with us around Christmas time, and I said the same thing. Look, you're here to trial out. Like, you're not expected to dangle everyone and score every shot. You're just expected to play well. Just enjoy yourself, and you'll probably get the most out of it. So, you know, he taught me a lot of hockey things, but he also taught me a lot of life lessons, and you know, seeing how he was around the room. He was one of the boys and kind of fit in really well, but then when his kids were around, it was just kind of father of the year, and you know, all his attention was with his 2 children. And yeah, I mean, you can probably tell he means a lot to me, and I look up to him a lot, even once he's passed on. And yeah, I mean, I love the fact that Coventry haven't had him called a box up in the around the rink, and I'm pretty sure his jersey's up in the stands as well. And I can't think of anyone, having played with him, I can't think of anyone more deserving, to be honest.
It's certainly, you can tell, you know, the players that you've had when you're younger certainly had the impact, and you're certainly doing the reverse now. We mentioned Basingstoke earlier. I've been missed to not mention the news earlier on this week with them not taking part next year to eventually get the rink at Basingstoke repaired and refurnished, as it were. It's never a nice piece of news to have as a player who's at the club, but also the fans as well. And you mentioned, you know, you enjoyed your time there, but for those who've never been or never been a part of Basingstoke, you know, what's that club like to be part of them? Is to kind of demonstrate just how much that they will be hurting at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think anyone that's ever played in Basingstoke over the last 3 or 4 years kind of knew this was coming at some point. I mean, it's been left for so long, and it's just been getting worse and worse. I think everyone was kind of I mean, I remember my last year there, which was 9 years ago, and the puck would get lost down between the ice and the boards on the ice. So, you know, that's 9 years ago, and nothing's really been done. So I think it's obviously incredibly disappointing. There's not many clubs in this country, and for a club like Basingstoke, with, you know, they were I think they were one of the founding members of the Elite League era, and you know, they've got such a rich history. And yeah, I mean, having spent time there, it's a weird, it's not weird, but it's kind of strange. You know, you're expected to win every game, but if you don't and you put in everything you have, fine, okay, on to the next one. Whereas if you lost a game and a few guys were kind of slacking with their effort, that was when, you know, the fans were very vocal about it. And, you know, they're extremely passionate. We always used to have 50 to 60, 70 fans travelling with us all the way up to Telford, Sheffield, which is, when you think about it, you know, the EPL, which was what it was then, is a semi-professional league, and you got 70 fans every weekend following you around the country to support you and do everything they can to try and make you better on the ice. And yeah, I mean, it's incredibly disappointing that it's happened, but I mean, I think everyone we played a charity game there and this summer just gone, and it was more like swimming than playing ice hockey. So I think the most disappointing thing is just how Planet Ice have let that rink deteriorate without doing anything. You know, there's a lot they could have done to kind of keep that rink going, and you know, with especially with Bracknell Bracknell rink being demolished, I think last year or a year before. It's a big hub for hockey in that area, and to see it kind of go down it's obviously disappointing. And Kieran Long tweeted the other day about how disappointing it was, and you know, we played a year there together, and yeah, I mean, it's obviously you got your memories from where you play places, and you never kind of want to see those clubs go down. And I think they're planning on skating the year after, playing again the year after next. So hopefully everything kind of goes well with the rebuild of the rink or the repairs of the rink or whatever they're planning to do, and they can get back on the ice and play the following year.
Zach, I want to go back to the Glasgow time you were there. Obviously, as you said, you went up as a young lad, played in the Finner. It must have been an exciting time. We often talk about Glasgow on this pod massively underachieving. Now, I personally think they could potentially be a massive club in the league, almost a sleeping giant. It's a wicked city, huge population. We all know they're mad about the sport in Glasgow as well. Why do you think for all those years Glasgow have never actually properly achieved maybe what they're potentially capable of doing. Even obviously under the conferences, there or thereabouts, but didn't actually ever really sort of get over the line. Can you put your finger on what maybe is missing as a club or organisation? Why after all this time they're still not really challenging for a title or even having won even another cup at all?
Yeah, I mean, I would first of all say that my first 2 years in Glasgow were not fun. I hated Finner and Finner hated me. I get on with him very well now, fortunately, but yeah, my first couple.
I hope so.
My first couple of years there.
He signed you again.
A bit petchy, but yeah, obviously he's GM in Manchester. We get on very well now, so yeah, I mean, it kind of goes. I think it kind of goes back to Finner's second year, so my first year there, and you know, Finner. The one thing that Finner was fantastic at throughout his time coaching was recruitment. I think you look at the guys that he's brought over to this league. You know, Matt Keith, he was a phenomenal player who was playing in the Dell when he came over. Got Alex Levitt, who was, I think, top 5 in points every single year he was here. Scott Pitt and Matt Becker, who were top 1 and 2, whichever way round they were. They were 1 and 2 every year. I think he brought Scott Arson over, who was one of the best defensive D-men who's played in this league. And I think his recruitment was incredible. And, you know, Lee Salters, the only reason he went to Cardiff was because they could get him on the uni programme and Glasgow couldn't. You know, Zach Fitzgerald played 3-4 years in Sheffield after Finner brought him over. So I think that first year, the team we had recruited, or the team Finner had recruited, was absolutely phenomenal. You know, guys who had NHL experience, Dell experience, at a time when that wasn't really commonplace. Now it is more so with the GB team doing so well and the league kind of getting more kind of attention worldwide. And I think going into that season, everyone was saying, "Oh, Glasgow are going to finish 6th or 7th," and we ended up finishing second to Sheffield by a point. We were a point behind them. They went to Edinburgh and lost, and we played Edinburgh on the Wednesday, and we both had 2 games on the weekend. So we seen that Sheffield had lost and went, okay, this is ours to win now. And then we went to Edinburgh and lost. We lost. Well, I think we lost 2-1. They had 15 shots. We had something like 64 shots, and their goalie absolutely stood on his head. Hadlowski, I think he went to Basingstoke shortly after. And I think kind of the expectations from the senior members of the club and from the fans changed massively. You know, but before that season, we were expected to go on the ice and put in a good effort. And if we won games, great. If we didn't, okay, that's fine. We're building to something. You know, 4 or 5 years' time, we'll be a club that will achieve something. And yeah, just kind of after that year, all expectations kind of changed. You know, Nottingham would come in and we'd be expected to win. Whereas my first year there, Nottingham are coming in, okay, like we're lucky if we take this to overtime. We're lucky if we keep this to 3 goals. I remember because of the conference system, we went down to Cardiff twice, went 5-0 down both times and brought it back to 5-5 and lost 15 seconds into overtime both times. And that was an unbelievable result. And then the second and third year, the second year especially, we did exactly the same. We went 5-0 down, got it back to 5-5, lost in overtime. And that was a disappointment. So I think kind of those expectations changed massively. And, you know, with the guys that come over here, you know, they're not, especially the North American guys, that this isn't the be all and end all of their career the majority of the time. You know, some of them are using it as a stepping stone to Europe or better leagues, or using it to just, especially a club like Glasgow at the time, using it to come into Glasgow and then get a contract from Belfast or Cardiff or Sheffield or Nottingham, and that big money contract. And Finner did fantastically well to keep hold of the core of that group. You know, Scott Arson, Scott Pitt, Matt Becker, Matt Keith, Stefan Meyer played 3 more years than he wanted to. So yeah, it was. I think that was kind of it. And now it's seen as a club that should be winning. Whereas, you know, when I was sat talking to Shep, we both kind of saw it as a developmental club. You know, it's a great place to go and play because young Brits will play. And then I think we finished third the year after, and fourth the year after that, and that's very good results. You know, especially when you're going up against the likes of Belfast, Cardiff were kind of coming. I think that was my third year in Glasgow, was their first year back in their new ring. Nottingham was still at the very top of things, same with Sheffield. And first, third and fourth is pretty good going as a team that's kind of expected to finish 7th, 8th, straight playoff. And this is going to sound like sour grapes, but every year we seem to pull our bogey team. So my first year there, we called Hull in playoffs, and our goalie Kyle Jones, phenomenal goaltender, never played well in Hull. Don't know what it was about the rink or the changing room or the travel. He never played well in Hull. And he had a shutout bonus which was less than 1.5 goals a game. And I think he went through a period where he picked up 16 shutout bonuses in a row. And we went to Hull and lost 7-4. And then he'd go for another streak of 5, and then we'd go to Hull and lose 6-3. And he just never seemed to be able. And he said that himself when we pulled Hull. He's like, "Oh, I've never played well in Hull." And then the year after, we pulled Fife, I believe, who we'd never beaten we didn't beat that year in the league. And then the year after, we pulled Dundee, who again we hadn't beaten in the league. So it was kind of where we finished was the opposite of where our worst possible nightmare finished. And yeah, obviously I don't agree with Finner being released from his tenure in Glasgow. I think maybe he wanted a new challenge as well. Maybe it was mutual. I don't know all the details to it, but I know that he was definitely excited about what he could have done in his fifth year there, because I've spoke to him at quite a length. He says, you go through these stages as a club where you bring players in, you have a good year, and then you build off the core of that team and build a stronger team. Coventry are a great example. Now, Coventry last year were good, but they weren't fantastic. This year, they've kept that core of the team, and nobody wants to play them in playoffs, put it that way. So it's kind of that when you're not one of the big budget teams like Sheffield and Belfast, Coventry, Manchester, Glasgow can't afford to get rid of 6 players because they lost 2 games over a weekend and bring 6 new guys in that week. So it's more of a long-term process. And I think kind of maybe the ownership or the people high up in Glasgow kind of lost sight of that and kind of made some maybe knee-jerk or rash decisions. We had John Tripp was my coach in the 4th year, and that was the first year we missed out on playoffs. Since I had been there, we lost both games against Guildford, I think, in doubleheader weekend. And if we'd won one of them, we would have made playoffs. We lost both quite substantially. They weren't close games at all. And that was kind of, okay, yeah, you're done. We'll bring in a new coach. And then obviously Glasgow brought in Pete, and we had a period from November, I think, to middle of February, and that was the year where Cardiff and Belfast ran away with the league. They were 6, 7, 8 points in front of everyone from October, and they just ran away with it. And we had Belfast in the Cup semi-final on the Thursday, and then double header against Belfast in Belfast. Away on Saturday, home on Sunday. And if we won that double header, we would have leapfrogged Belfast in second. So Belfast and Cardiff were running away with it, and then all of a sudden Glasgow were there in third going, "Hi, we're knocking on the door trying to bring you guys down." So obviously Pete left to the Del 2. I think that was the year he went to Freiburg, but that he'd signed a 2-year deal to kind of stay on. So I think they kind of went back to that. Okay, he's had a good year. We can build off the core of this and build a much better team the year after. And yeah, I think that's kind of, I think a good kind of analogy is Chelsea at the moment. You know, the players they have, teams all around the world want their players, but they give managers 3 months ago, and nobody can really fit those players into a system that works, or maybe get rid of some players that don't fit that team anymore and bring in new guys that do. And I think if you don't give coaches time or teams time, you're not going to see results unless you're a big budget team. You know, I think Aaron Fox did really well in his first year, but his budget was probably 3 times the amount of some other teams around the league. And look at what Adam Keith is doing in Belfast again this year. I mean, they're on for the Triple Crown again. But again, you know, we went to Belfast and beat them twice for the first time in 4 or 5 years, and 6 players were released and 6 new players were brought in. The majority of teams can't afford to do that. So I think it's kind of, I mean, it's kind of a wishy-washy comment, kind of one of those like sayings, cliches. You got to kind of trust the process sometimes. You know, you bring in a coach that the fans liked and plays attractive style of hockey. Give him the time to build what he wants to build. And I know that, you know, John Tripp wasn't our cup of tea, particularly my year when he was there, but it was his first year coaching. He would have been a lot different in his second year coaching if he'd been given the time, but he wasn't. So yeah, I think that's kind of it. I think they're kind of looking for the immediate results that, you know, Sheffield, Belfast, Nottingham, Cardiff have, which unless you have the budget to match them, you're not going to. You know, if you look at that Belfast team, I think every single player on that team is wanted by another club. Same with Sheffield, same with, you know, Cardiff. So it's hard to compete with those teams on a 1 year process. And I think that's kind of what Glasgow have fallen into. You know, the fan base is absolutely phenomenal. You know, they regularly sell out fan events like end of the season do, Christmas event, whatever it is. They regularly sell them out to the point where they've had to now split from, okay, we're going to do a Halloween event, but we're also going to do a kids Halloween event because there's just got too many people wanting to come. So they've obviously got the fan base. I mean, Rangers obviously being back in the Premier League hurts the attendances a little bit, because when I first went there, that was when they'd been dropped down to the bottom league. So you had a lot of Rangers come and you had a lot of Celtic fans come because Celtic were just beating everyone 5-0, and that's boring. Whereas Rangers were playing in Tier 3 and that's boring to watch. So that them kind of competing again in the Scottish Premier League is kind of hurts the attendances a little bit. But, you know, I think with them getting the rink ownership rights, and I think they've got an opportunity to kind of go back to what they were doing with, you know, bringing a coach that they trust, bringing a guy that they can give 3 years or 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, and go, right, you've got this amount of time, do something with it. So I think they'll be interesting. Obviously, the events that went on this year were farcical, even as far as British ice hockey goes, but they're also probably one of the only clubs in the league that can recover from that kind of thing. So, you know, obviously I played 5 years there. They gave me my first chance to play in the Elite League. So they obviously have a soft spot in my heart, and I want to see them do well. Which, you know, you talk to anyone that's played in Glasgow, they all say the same thing. You know, it's a club that stays with you. It's not a club that you go and kind of, I don't want to be here, I want to leave. You know, even when I left, I didn't really want to leave. That was a decision that was made for me. So yeah, I hope they kind of take the time to go through a proper rebuild and kind of find a coach that, you know, a Danny Stewart type or a Matt Ginn type that they can give some time to and really build something that's kind of a formidable force. I mean, I was talking to a couple of the guys last week. You look at the teams at the start of this season on paper, everyone was worried about Nottingham and Glasgow. And yeah, okay, those teams didn't materialise on the ice, but from the names on the sheet of paper, you know, everyone thought Glasgow and Nottingham were going to walk away with this league.
I think, as you say, a lot of the reasons why Glasgow maybe slightly underachieved is the maybe lack of stability in terms of coaching, whether it comes from the management or whatever. No one was given a proper, crack at it. Even way back to when Kristanovic was coach, he'd be playing sometimes 2 lines, very sort of depleted numbers. The conference system, of course, definitely benefited Glasgow at the time, which of course made sense when they're trying to grow the sport in Scotland. Dundee were fairly new still. Your Stars were quite a new team as well. Do you ever see Glasgow, though, having the sort of the balls to kind of go out, maybe compete, as you say, in that bigger market in terms of budget? Or do you think of the current management they've got now, with Neil Black at the helm still, that's unlikely to happen? Do you think you'd have to take a new ownership group to come in to go out and spend big like a Cardiff or a Belfast or a Sheffield? Just to kind of try to make that club a success?
I mean, if you look at the players they signed this year, they weren't cheap players. You're taking a player away from Guildford. You're paying him a lot of money to leave Guildford. And Dunbar was top 10 points every single year in Guildford. I know Paul Dixon very well, so I kind of know what the offer on the table was as well. And it wasn't peanuts by any means. It was, he was probably up there with some of the highest paid guys in the league, and take Stephen Dixon away from Cardiff. That's, well, sorry, I lost you for a bit. Am I back? Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. So John Dunbar away from Guildford, and then to take a guy like Stephen Dixon away from Cardiff, that's going to cost you a bit of money, considering he spent 5 years there. And then obviously they couldn't keep Starlet, which I think if they Starlet was, in my opinion, the only reason they were a half decent team last year. He stood on his head pretty much every night. But they then go and get John News halfway through the season, who again is not a cheap goalie to go and find. So I don't think it's a case of not being willing to spend the money. I think that was definitely the case kind of my early years in Glasgow. I know that Neil Black was kind of wary of forking out the money for both Nottingham and Glasgow. But no, I think he's more than willing to get the players in. Obviously, I don't think that the coach was particularly well liked in Glasgow, especially with what went on this season. So, I think it's. I don't think they're scared of going out and competing with the big teams. I mean, by all extents, they're not. Then, like I said, they're not going to change 6 players halfway through the season, but they're more than willing to go and spend that money at the beginning of the season. I mean, they took Jordan County away from Guildford as well, and again, yeah, okay, he's from Scotland, but that's still a hefty wage packet that you're willing to pay. And they signed in my opinion, probably the next best British D-man in Liam Stenson. I think he's absolutely fantastic. They took him away from Solway when he had four other offers on the table. So I don't think it's a case of they're scared. I think it's a case of, especially over the last 2 years, they kind of put their faith in the wrong person. I don't think it was necessarily the right person at the helm, which happens sometimes. I mean, that's you make a judgment call at the beginning of the year, and you think that this is the guy for you, and then he kind of throws that back in your face with a stupid decision halfway through the year. So I think they're more than willing to spend the money. I don't necessarily think new ownership needs to come in for them to do something, to win something.
Zach,
new ownership.
Sorry, just before I forget this one, do you think everything that's gone on in Glasgow this year, other players think, I'm not sure about going there? Because it's not been a good time with Glasgow. They signed the guy that they had to then quit. It's not been a great season. And do you think imports would maybe go, even imports in the league playing this year would maybe not consider going to Glasgow?
I know it definitely happened for guys this year. Chase Harrison, who's probably one of our best D-men this year, came into us, I think, in November time. And he had a contract offer from Glasgow, and then saw the whole incident that went on up in Glasgow and kind of went, I don't want to go there, get me somewhere else. So I think it's definitely hurt them this year as far as trying to bring in 2 D-men and then kind of insult to injury Ra and Laporte leave kind of when they're trying to get distance themselves from this thing that's gone on. I think they brought in Muse around the same time as Wazzy and Laporte left. So I think it's definitely hurt them this year. You can't deny that. But I think also as a player, you look at a club that's gone through that kind of thing. You know they're going to do everything they can to make sure that kind of thing doesn't happen again. They've had a disappointing year on and off the ice. I think everyone associated with Glasgow knows that. So they're kind of the club that you kind of look at that club as a player and go, they're not going to have problems next year, if that makes sense.
You were involved in an incident. I thought, oh shit, this guy is dead. I remember there was a game late in the game. It might even have been the last minute of a game going into overtime when Cardiff played yourselves. You were behind the boards in the corner, behind the goals in the corner, and Bordelow's head just was gone. And you kind of looked up, and it's this 6'5" psychopath running down on you, and he just drills you into the boards. And I just thought, oh my God, that guy is going to be just out on a stretcher. And you got back up, and fair play to you. I just can't imagine what it must have been like to be on the receiving end of an angry Patrick Bordelow when you're not prepared for like that guy coming to try and take your head off. Talk me through that. Just what's your memories, if you got any memories of it?
Yeah, that was kind of I think that was the year we had Jay Rosehill. It was the year that, so the year before, Nottingham had signed. Again, his name's kind of left me, but they'd signed a tough guy, and he'd kind of bullied the entire league. Then he left for a radio role, I think, with St. Louis Blues. But everyone had signed a tough guy.
Cam Jansen.
That's it, Cam Jansen. So he kind of bullied the entire league, being this physical tough guy. And then every team kind of signed a tough guy in answer. So we had Jay Rosehill. Nottingham ended up with Brian McGrattan. Bordelow went to Cardiff, and then you had Nielsen in Manchester, Nickerson, Vandermeer in Belfast, and it was just everyone had a tough guy. And we were kind of joking that year about how it was going back. We were going to start having nicknames for all these fighters again, like the Sheriff and all this kind of stuff. And actually had a close call with him in Cardiff. So the Brit group we had in Glasgow was absolutely phenomenal. It was myself, Barry McKenzie, Matt Hayward, Craig Peacock, Gary Russell, Ben Davies. And we had a running joke that whenever we went to Cardiff, I would get run, like absolutely drilled, in the bottom right corner. Every single time we went and played there, I'd get absolutely demolished in the bottom right corner. And I remember picking the puck up behind the net in Cardiff, wheeling the back of the net, and I can hear the linesman saying it's offside. He's screaming at the top of his voice, offside, offside, offside. So I haven't got my head up. I'm like, I've got all the time in the world coming around the net, and I looked up and just saw Bordelow coming at the front post, full steam ahead. Obviously couldn't hear or wasn't listening to the linesman. And I remember just kind of shooting the puck away and like jumping onto the back of the net to avoid getting hit. But he came over after. He was like, "Oh, sorry, man. I didn't hear. I'm like, I'm just happy I'm still alive." And then, yeah, like you say, I think it was a TV game as well. We played Cardiff. Like you say, about a minute left, and something had annoyed him. Something had crossed him the wrong way. He was annoyed with what was going on. I think it may be a lack of ice time or something like that. And I remember just getting the puck I think I was battling someone in the corner, and looking up and just I didn't even see him because he jumped into the hit. So he's 6'4" or 6'7", whatever he is. I'm 5'9". So he's already half a foot taller than me. And then he's jumping into the hit. So I saw his chest squashing my head against the boards. It didn't actually hurt that much. It was one of those weird ones where I think I wasn't really expecting it. So I wasn't really tensed up. And I just looked up, got absolutely smoked, flew backwards into the boards. And then all I remember from that is actually being quite annoyed that we didn't score on the 5-minute power play, because obviously he got thrown out because I left the game, and we didn't score on the 5-minute power play, and then they scored in overtime to win. So I think that was.
I remember that. We were fuming at the time, saying that Poxy Bordelot, that game is huge, and we'd written the game off, to be fair, and we were convinced that penalty was just. And you're right, a lot of his frustration was lack of ice time. He definitely was a player that expected to be the big cheese in Cardiff and didn't get it. Before I bring the boys back in, one thing I do want to ask you about Cardiff, as we're talking about Cardiff, obviously you had a late call-up last season to play in the CHL, which obviously must have been a nice thing to have after the career you had when you maybe in Manchester didn't expect to play maybe in the CHL over again. Talk about how that kind of came about, and would that rank as one of your sort of highlights of your career? I know you played in Glasgow, and I'm pretty sure you played in the CHL in Glasgow as well. So to get that late call up must have been fantastic to play against those kind of players that are the best in Europe, essentially.
Yeah, I don't think my mum was too pleased. I was actually due to be cooking at my mum. My mum owns a nursery. And her cook had taken 2 weeks off, and they were the 2 weeks that I was supposed to be cooking in the nursery for. So I don't think she was very impressed. I think my little sister had to come in as an emergency backup to cover for me. But no, I was genuinely cooking in my mum's nursery. I was talking to my mum about something. I can't remember what the conversation was about, but it was quite an important conversation. And my phone was going, Ryan Finnity's calling you. And I said to my mum, I've got to take this is Finner. So I picked the phone up, and he's like, hey, how are you? And I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. Like, how are you? And he was like, oh, you've been skating much? I was like, oh, a couple of times. And like with summer skate with Rumford now in the Raiders in London. And it was one of those conversations you sometimes have with a coach before the season to kind of just check up on you, see if there's anything that you're worried about with the season. Obviously now, like, by this time last year, I get on very, very well with Finner, and it was one of those conversations which was just kind of like, how you doing? Like, you ready to get going? You excited? This is who you're probably going to be D partners with, blah, 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 blah. And then he said, like, where have you been? Have you been skating? I was like, oh, a couple of times in the league below. And he's like, oh, okay. Do you want to play for Cardiff in the CHL tomorrow? And I was it was one of those, like, it was, the way he said it was just an offhand comment. It was like, oh, do you fancy playing tomorrow? And I was just, it kind of took me a couple of seconds. I was like, oh, yeah, I'm not going to say no. But my kit was in Romford. So this is a Friday. I think he called me at 10 a.m. I don't finish cooking in my mum's nursery till 2, which means I'm driving around the M25 the wrong way during rush hour traffic into the middle of London to get my kit to come home to go to Cardiff the next day. And I think there was a massive accident on the M25. So we'd actually had comedy show tickets with my family. I think I ended up turning up about an hour and a half late for that. The Cardiff coach called me, and he was kind of like, yeah, we're having a pre-game meeting at 10 a.m. and obviously he had COVID, so he wasn't going to be at the rink. So it was in Todd Kelman's office on a Skype projector. So he's talking to us on Skype while we've got the video on projector about Lausanne, a Swiss A team, coming in and playing us. But yeah, I mean, it was definitely a lot of fun. I mean, it was one of those things where you can skate as much as you want in the summer and you're not ready for the season. So it kind of helped me to kind of get up to speed a little bit before all the other Manchester boys, and it definitely led to a weird pre-season because obviously we played Cardiff in pre-season, so Manchester versus Cardiff. And I remember saying to all the guys, so we went to, obviously Cardiff's a lovely rink, and then we went to Mannheim, which is just out of this world, and then Lausanne as well, which is another phenomenal rink. And I remember saying to him, I was like, oh, none of these rinks have anything on Manchester. You'll love it when you get to Manchester, knowing full well that they're all going to hate it, and they're all going to be like, this can't be a rink in this league. But no, I got on with I got on with the majority of guys. Obviously, Richie was my D partner for GB, and the 1 year I played, and then I know Ben O'Connor really well, and obviously Ben Davies played with him, and Sam Duggan and Josh Waller. I mean, I just like to say how good is Waller now. He is lights out.
We're fanboys of Waller on the pod. We, as recently as the weekend, we talked about how in Cardiff he's underutilised. He should be a top 6 all day, every day. Waller is just unreal. And yeah, we need no convincing on Josh Waller on here. We just always big him up all the time.
Well, I actually played with both of his brothers. So played with his I played with one of his brothers is my age. Played with him in Swindon, and then played with Sam Waller in Slough. So I've played with all 3 Wallers now. So not sure there's many guys that can say that. But no, they were really welcoming. You know, well, the majority of guys were really welcoming. I never really got on that well with Register, which I completely understand. You know, you're playing in the CHL against these phenomenal teams, and you've got some guy who's not going to play with you all season. You know, why would you put the effort in to kind of get on with him? And I had no problems with him. It was just kind of, you know, that's fine. That's how you're going to take it. I kind of went in with the view of, you know, I'm here to help out. I'll do everything I can on the ice, but, you know, by no means am I going to try and become best friends with you in the week and a half that I'm here. You know, I'm here to come in and help you guys do a job, and then I've got my own team. So it was a lot of fun. You know, it's not so much fun getting absolutely demolished by Mannheim in Germany. It was an experience, but yeah, I mean, it was really high quality of hockey. I mean, the fact that we somehow beat Lausanne in Cardiff as well. And you know, when I came here and I was telling the guys at the start of the year, you know, we beat Lausanne, and they were like, oh, they must have played awful. I was like, no, we dominated them all game. Like, it wasn't like it was. I think it was 5-3 the game ended, and we could have easily beaten them by more, and it wouldn't have been an unfair scoreline. So yeah, I mean, it's you know, like you said, I fortunately had the chance to play with in the CHL for Glasgow. We played Ingolstadt and Vakwa. Which again was, I mean, we went to Vaxo in Sweden. We went 2-0 up and ended up losing 10-2.
What a wild place that is, eh? I'm not sure if you managed to get out on the town after the game over there, but was one of the weirdest places I've been in my whole life. Cool rink, but as a town, it's just like, how the hell is that an SNL team?
Yeah. We were told categorically by Neil Black that we were not allowed out, which ended up with us all. I think we ended up on some rooftop bar somewhere in some weird place around that show. And then Ingolstadt was amazing. We lost 5-4 and gave up 5 on 3 goals. So whenever anyone says there's penalty trouble, that's I kind of think of that game. It's like 5 on 3 goals, and you lose the game 5-4. But they put on an Oktoberfest for us. So the fans and our fans and us. So we went out after that one, and our assistant coach had to be escorted back by Ingolstadt's head coach because he was causing a bit of trouble in the bars. Richard Hartman, he was a very funny drunk, let's put it that way. But no, it was. I mean, first of all, like it's a huge compliment to be asked to go and play for Cardiff. You know, the number of D-men there are around the league that, you know, Todd went out of his way to call Finner to ask for me. That's a huge compliment from Todd and from, you know, I'm sure Mark Richardson and Oki had some say in who was coming in. So, you know, I'm sure they considered their options and kind of made a decision. But that was I took that as a huge compliment. And then we obviously went back for pre-season, and Franny kind of called me over before the game and handed me just a plastic bag, and both of my CHL jerseys were in there, which again was just something that there was no need for them to do it, but it was just such a nice touch that I was really touched. And I remember Finner saying to me, I'll take out the swervers. He said, "Don't you dare open that bag, and don't you dare take those Cardiff jerseys out in my dressing room." So it was a really fun experience. Obviously, getting to kind of see what Cardiff's like, not being in the Cardiff dressing room. It's a fantastic dressing room if anyone's ever been in there. And the group of guys last year was really great. Although it does kind of beg the question as to why McNally chose me to cross-check in the back of the head 8 times in pre-season rather than someone who didn't know.
That's McNally, big McNally, to be fair. Do you know what I mean? He's a Lawrence himself, isn't he, really? I think Sheffield have seen the side of him that Cardiff fans could have told them about. But, Zach, it's been great. Obviously, one of the guys kind of come in now. Otherwise, I'll be on the chat with you all night and they'll be just sitting by twiddling their thumbs.
And it's a good job the Swiss team weren't Davos, Zach, because me and Scott would have just had to leave because John loves Davos.